All right, so after evaluating those logarithms, just to refresh yourselves on how to do that, I also want to refresh your memory a little bit on some of these log properties. We also did these in Algebra 2. These log properties, there's three of them, the product, the quotient, and the power. They should make sense to you if you can recall what logarithms really are. What are logarithms? Exponents. Yep. That was one of the big things I had you guys jot down the other day to kind of refresh your memory on them. Logarithms are exponents. So therefore, they will follow all of your exponent rules. Think about it. If you take x to the fifth times x to the third, what do you do with the exponents when you do x to the fifth times x to the third?
You add.
You add them. Okay? So if I have a multiplication going on, the logarithm of two things that are being multiplied together, you could also think of them as being separate and just adding the two separate logarithms. Logarithms are like exponents, therefore they follow all of your exponent rules. When you're multiplying, you add the exponents. When you're dividing, you subtract the exponents. Or when you subtract the exponents, you're actually dividing, however you want to see it. And when you raise a power to another power, you multiply those powers together. So all of these rules should make sense to you. All these properties should make sense because they're really just following all of your exponent rules, because logarithms are exponents and therefore they follow exponent rules. That is definitely something you would want to be able to explain at some point in time. Okay? Why these properties are true. Alright? So those are your log properties. Usually, log properties are used to condense down to a single logarithm. Okay? Here's what I mean by that. And some of you that have finished through problem 51 on that review I just gave you had to use a couple of these properties. Okay? So write this down. Log x plus log of x plus log of y minus log of z. The directions might ask you to write this expression as a single logarithm. Okay? Well, the first thing I would probably do is I'd start with these two logarithms, and I'd combine them or condense them down to the log of what?
X1.
X times y, or xy. How did I know I should multiply there? Because there was addition. Okay. And then now, lastly, I'm going to combine these two logarithms here, and that'd be the log of xy divided by z. And that's an example. That's a very basic example of you condensing something down to a single logarithm. Okay? I'll put some powers out in front. Anybody need more time on this slide? You got that? Okay. 3 log x minus 6 log y. I'll do kind of a challenging one here. Minus 8 log z. Let's condense that down into a single logarithm. Before you do any condensing, I would probably move those numbers out in the front. Where would you move them?
Above the equations.
Okay, to the power, right? So really now I have the log of x cubed minus the log of y to the 6th minus the log of z to the 8. I'm using that last property, that power property that I showed you. Okay, where when you have a power to a power, you're multiplying. So if we're taking 3 times this exponent, really it can be this exponent, or this raised to the third power, that x raised to the third. Okay? Now we can start doing some condensing. What will this be?
X to the third over y to the sixth.
Good. And then if I condense those, it'll be the log of what?
Just be a fraction over a fraction.
I don't even, I mean, if you're trying to take this divided by z to the 8th, you can just put it in the denominator. So it'd be x cubed over y to the 6th z to the 8th, like that. Okay. I mean, think about it. 1/3 divided by 2. I mean, that'd be like 1/3 times 2, which is 1/6, right? You can just essentially move the 2 down to the denominator, because that's like dividing by 2. So yeah, you can just put it right in the denominator with your y to the 6th. Okay. So some problems on the test, I will have you condense them down to a single logarithm. Some problems on the test, I may have you start with a single logarithm and expand it out to 3 or 4 or however many logarithms you would need. So that's just a little refresher on using those log properties. Do you have any questions on those? Does this ring a bell from last year? Okay, I just got a couple I want you to practice on a worksheet. Honestly, if they're really easy, do the ones at the end. And if you can do the ones at the end, then we can move past this and get to a little more of the story problem and the application stuff.